So, good morning. My name is Nancy Toll.
And I am Amy Thurston. We are retired school teachers. We taught together at the old junior high and then at the middle school for many years.
Yeah, I taught science.
And I taught language arts.
So we're not history buffs.
No, it's interesting because we really are not experts by any means on history, especially local history. When I look out here, there are other people who are certainly more qualified and know more than we do, but we have found it to be interesting. Back in 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, I started the Historic Hudson, Wisconsin Facebook page. And then in 2021, Nancy and I started volunteering here at the Nancy Hawkinson History Room. And so for 3 years, we've been trying to update it a little bit and some exciting things that are going to happen here in the near future with digitizing the microfilm collection. So we both like puzzles, and that's kind of what it is many times when you're going back, especially doing the walks around the block that we've had, when you're going back to 1850s records and there are no Sanborn maps and there are no photos. So you're reading old accounts and they'll say north of somebody's barn, and so it's just like a big puzzle. And so we're enjoying this, and we hope today that you will enjoy this journey back in time, and really thank you all so much for coming.
I'm going to start today by summarizing Hudson's really early history, so including the town's founders and how the river played such an important role in the development of Hudson as a city. Please feel free to ask questions anytime or add a story. Again, you might know more than we do as far as this, so we're open to conversation on this whole thing. So the first explorers to pass through the area came by boat. There weren't roads, there were railroads at that time. And it was Father Lewis Hennepin was one of them, kind of well known in the Twin Cities area, and Daniel Gracel in Duluth. And the name for the river, the St. Croix River, probably came from Monsieur St. Croix. He was a Frenchman that was part of Father Hennepin's expedition, and it was buried around here in 1680. But Father Hennepin was a Belgian missionary who came to the area via the Mississippi River, so up from the south, representing France, and with the hope of saving or converting the Native Americans that lived here at the time. Duluth arrived from Canada, so he came down from the north, also representing the French, and he actually helped save Father Hennepin from being captured by the Sioux Indians. So they got to know each other there. The Chippewa and Sioux Indians actually lived in the area for many generations before white settlers colonized and populated the area. They didn't really set up permanent locations around here because they were more hunters, so they followed what they were hunting instead of settling down in an area. Plus, they would go south during the harsh winters. They didn't really stay around here. So it wasn't until 1840, over 140 years after Hennepin and Duluth came through, that Louis Massey, a French Canadian, and Peter Boucher, a French Indian fur trader, and Massey's brother-in-law, canoed into the Willow River and located here. These two were the first settlers and are regarded as the founders of Hudson. The area was described as sand with great hills rising up quickly from deep valleys. So thus it was not the most hospitable place to live in the Hudson area, particularly compared to some of the other areas along the St. Croix. Soon after Massey and Boucher came, Joe LeGroux, yes.
Can I just point out that this is Lorraine Jacobs,
Yes.
and that is her third great grandfather, Louis Massey, and third great uncle.
Yeah.
She turned 100.
I'm 100 years old, so.
It's wonderful.
And when Nancy, do feel free to Tell us more.
Yes,
Sure,
yes,
add if you have anything to add, they ask.
yes.
Oh,
Lorraine, yeah,
no, not,
Not right now, off the top of your head.
Lorraine has donated and worked with the Hudson History Room, and we have a lot of her materials on North Hudson, and it's just a treasure. She's a treasure to have here. So, going on here, soon after Boucher and Massey came, Joe LeGroux and William Steets joined them. And the first Yankee or English settler was Captain John B. Page, who arrived in 1845. He started a logging camp in 1847, and his daughter Abigail Page was the first white child born in Hudson. You may recognize the name from the Antique Emporium named after her in downtown on 2nd Street. Captain Page established a logging camp on the Willow River, and at that time the settlement was simply called Page's Landing. The town, actually, the area transitioned through a few names. It was called Boucher at one time, it was called Willow River, and it was called Buena Vista before they decided on Hudson, the name of Hudson, which was adopted in 1851. In 1868, Abigail Page married George Bailey. He was from Iowa, came up here after the Civil War. He was a carpenter by trade, and he started a farm right where the Hudson High School is today. That was their farmland. They raised 7 children, and after her husband died, she moved closer into town, which was farmland at that time, so closer into town, and lived on 2nd Street. Toward the end of her life, she enjoyed visiting with friends, neighbors, and relatives, and she loved telling stories about Hudson in the early days and sharing the antiquity of her hometown. She passed away in 1945 at the age of 98. Several of her belongings are on display at the Octagon House Museum here in Hudson. The main commerce for early settlers was logging. In 1847, 10 acres of logs were sent down the St. Croix to Lake Pepin, as milling didn't begin in Hudson until 1851. So they didn't have mills to saw the logs into boards, so they had to send them clear down to Lake Pepin to do that. As the mills were built as far north as Stillwater, you'd still get jams. This was a log jam up by Stillwater, and it got so bad at one point the pressure would build up in the logs that they would pop and be thrown into the air. So it was a very dangerous place to be. And it just kills me just to watch these guys walking over the river on the logs. It's just like literally what they did.
in suits.
Yeah, yes, yeah. In 1848, Wisconsin became a state. And soon after, the first land was surveyed in Hudson. Massey, Boucher, and Steets quickly filed claim to what is now all of Hudson and North Hudson land along the river. So, this works. There we go. So, Steets purchased the land in North Hudson along the river up here. And then Massey purchased the land along the river down to Elm Street. And Boucher owned the land further south, down towards the marina area. Note also the Willow River and Lake Malibu, they weren't dammed at that time. So the shape of the river has really changed from what it used to be. You can see how it's flowing out towards the south here, where now there's a dam, and so it comes out more to the side. The river was essential to early Hudson, as that was the only way to move large amounts of products and food to the area, and the only way to move the timber south. This map depicts Hudson in the 1860s, showing multiple ferries and steamboats that would have been seen on the river at that time. The appearance of the railroad in 1854 started to change things, though. In 1854, a railway was extended from the East Coast to Dubuque, Iowa. And knowing that, Daniel Baldwin platted North Hudson, buying up most of the land so he could build car shops for the railroad. And at that time, there were still 5 sawmills near Hudson, 3 near Buckeye Street and south, 1 at Vine Street, and 1 at the mouth of the Willow River. The state granted permission for the railroad to extend north through Hudson to Superior, but it was soon abandoned due to a few critical issues. And one of those obstacles was the Panic of 1857. In Britain, a major bank was found circumventing regulations and not backing up their savings with gold or silver. And so that word spread rapidly because of the invention of the telegraph. At the times, banks started closing, and the new rail line to Superior had to be abandoned. Hudson saw the effects of the panic, but the town was very resilient. They increased production, primarily wood, that was used in the Civil War from 1861 to 1865. Then Hudson experienced a major disaster with the Great Fire of 1866. On May 19, 1866, fire broke out at the shed of a furniture store owned by H.A. Taylor and Company. It shared a building with the Star and Times newspaper. That building is about where Dick's Bar is today, on Walnut between 1st and 2nd Streets. Everything between Locust and Kinnickinnick Street, which there was a Kinnickinnick Street at one time, this is no longer there, between Buckeye and Wisconsin. Everything burned except a brick building that houses the Ultimissimo Hair Salon today. Luckily, there was no loss of life, but 64 businesses were destroyed, 25 houses were lost. Hudson residents, though, were resilient again. They all pitched in. Businesses moved into barns, churches, and schools to begin again. Hudson was back and running with the lumber industry, peaking in 1872. It was 17 mills along the St. Croix. There was a large influx of Italians and Norwegians in the late 1860s and 70s because they were very familiar with the lumber industry. And at this time, D.A. Baldwin and Jacob Humbird started construction on a railroad line to Toma that traveled through Eau Claire and Black River Falls, which was completed in 1871. The railway changed to the West Wisconsin Railway, and car shops were moved from Eau Claire to North Hudson. But the railroad also had its share of issues. If you notice in the older picture on the left, the railroad would come down through Hudson, but it couldn't go just straight across the river here. It was known as the Hudson Hill problem, or the problem with Hudson Hill. The trains, because the hill was so steep, couldn't stop fast enough and slow down fast enough. So they had to route them through North Hudson and come out to the river on the other side. So that was a major issue with the railroad being in Hudson. Once new lines were added, you can see over on the right-hand side, they did have lines that would come down the hill, straight down the hill. But in 1907, March 12, 1907, Ed Moe was the conductor of Engine 309, and it lost control coming down Hudson Hill and careened into the depot area, much to the chagrin of the people that were working there. No lives were lost, but there were extensive injuries. The track was blocked, so trains couldn't get through. And then another similar incident occurred that August of that same year, in 1907, and Hudson, that railroad incidents really led to the United States creating new rules for railroad tracks and trains. In 1926, they had new brake pressures, car weights, and slope requirements for the trains and the cars on the train. And when the railroad crossed the river and connected to the Northwestern and St. Paul in 1871, it brought a great influx of travelers through town. One of the stories I found most interesting, on the St. Croix, they were building the bridge across, and one night, 6 steamboats actually moved down the river from Stillwater with about 200 lumber mill men who were angry because they had only left a 98-foot opening for the timbers and the boats to get through to go down the river. And so they started ripping out the piling that you can see that builds the bridges there. They were able to remove 80 piles before they came to an agreement finally that they would widen it. And so they satisfied the lumber mills and the larger boats. This picture you see here is actually the railroad bridge that went across the Willow River to North Hudson. But the piles, it's probably the best picture we have of the piles, how they constructed those railroad tracks going across there. And the railroad industry grew quickly in North Hudson, where Baldwin was finally able to see all his efforts come to fruition. A large 7-stall roundhouse was constructed, and many other buildings that still remain today in North Hudson. The first stockholders meeting of the new Chicago, St. Paul, Minneapolis, and Omaha Railway met in Hudson for the first time June 4th, 1881. So we were kind of at the hub of things. In 1872, the railway was expanded to New Richmond. In 1878, we went from St. Paul down to River Falls. And finally, the St. Croix and Superior Bayfield lines joined up in 1883. So though Hudson no longer has a depot and train stop, the rail still runs through the town as part of the Northwestern system today. So thus Hudson was really shaped by the St. Croix and the early transportation it afforded the lumber industry here, which in turn made this a great hub for the railroads. We have a lot more information on Hudson's early history, the very early things in the library history room, so please feel free to visit. It's open anytime the library is open. And now Amy is going to share more about some modern history.
Yeah, is there anything else anybody would like to add or questions or?
Well, I know today it's Union Pacific, not Chicago Northwestern.
Right,
Yeah.
they've changed a lot, yes. Well, the next series are just kind of a hodgepodge of different pictures of Hudson. And the first one, of course, we have here is the toll bridge. I'd like to know how many of you are from Hudson? Wow, okay. How many of you remember the toll bridge? Apparently it was really quite the feat, especially in the wintertime. And there was the toll person who would stand in the middle, and if somebody drove through who didn't pay, then they often would have some kind of a gun or whatever to shoot to get the policeman to come. But this bridge originally was kind of controversial. In 1912, it was built in 1913, there was some concern about it. So actually it was owned privately by some local businessmen. And then for like 2 years or so, and then it, became part, everybody saw, oh, yeah, this is making some money. So the city became involved again with that.
And okay, if you don't know where it was, the dike road if you would go under the arch, the Hudson Arch, and drive off the dike, that's the
Yeah.
road to the
End of
bridge.
Walnut. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So now, we walk straight, it appears like this is kind of high on the hill.
This is the Minnesota side.
Oh.
You're looking towards Hudson, yeah.
Yep. So you can imagine trying to get up that incline.
Question, before that, wasn't there a ferry?
Yes.
Yes.
There were a couple,
ferries.
not O. Henry, Jennings, I can't remember. There were a couple of different ferries that went across there.
That was the controversy. That was the controversy, that ferries didn't, this road put the ferries out of business.
Exactly, you're right. The O. Henning or something like that was one of them, I can't recall. And then, of course, a lot of people have very fond memories of what became known as the Blue Bridge, right? And that opened in 1951, and then it was there for some time before, of course, eventually it was, torn down. And it opened in November of 51 until the 1990s when a new bridge was built. But a lot of people said, I knew we were on our way home when we got to the Blue Bridge. Yeah. And probably one of the most noteworthy places, kind of like a landmark, is the Hudson Arch, which we still have today. Dr. Boyd Williams, who had his sanatorium, the upper end of 3rd Street, it was through his money that the arch was built in 1936. And so it served as a sign for motorists, especially when the Yellowstone Trail was going through. And they would know that they were about to go into Minnesota or come back from Minnesota. In 2016, the neon lights were replaced with lettering illuminated by LED lights. The city council approved using $12,000 of room tax revenue for the upgrade. Tom Zuley, director of Hudson Public Works, said the old neon lighting frequently failed, requiring repairs. So I think most people would associate this with Hudson, one of the classics. St. Patrick's Church, the Catholic church there that was at the corner of, northwest corner of St. Croix and 4th Street. And was there in 1879, am I right, Levon?
1874.
1874, see, this is why we have our experts here. The parsonage was located next door, and it is still there today as a beautiful home. The church was raised in the early 1990s. And here on the right, we do have an interior view, and that is Dorothy Ritchie Jensen and Ron Jensen's wedding. The First Baptist Church is kind of an icon. Whenever you look at a map or a picture, sometimes you'll have these beautiful aerial views from Prospect Park or wherever. I always look for the First Baptist Church because that kind of grounds you, you know? So the Baptists were the first to organize a church in Hudson. They met May 29th, 1852 at the house of Deacon Martin under the leadership of Reverend Catlin with a membership of 11. The church was then built in 1866. Then we have our old high school, and actually we have our old high school present here too. That's the original, on the right is the original high school. It was at the corner of 4th and Oak, erected in 1887 and raised in 1924. That's not very long, really, but there were apparently some significant structural issues. So the Hudson High School building that we know of as today was built in 1919, and it's now Willow River Elementary. Lots of people have very fond memories of 4th Street Elementary. 4th Street Elementary was built in 1924 on the corner of 4th and Oak. It was the former site of where that real old high school was. The 4th Street Elementary had 12 classrooms, 2 small offices, and a small storage area on 3 floors. It was raised in 2002 to make room for the Willow River Elementary School extension. How many of you remember this building? Who went to school there? Oh, there we go, fond memories,
It
right?
was a scary school, let me tell you. I worked in IT after I taught for 20 years. I worked in IT at the school district, and we'd have to go in there to work on the infrastructure for the technology there. And I had a technician that would not step foot in that building because it would howl. You would hear this howling because of the ventilation system. It was crazy.
I remember the
So,
green colors always.
yeah.
All good green in there.
When did it become a middle school?
Well, this one was actually torn down. This,
Oh, okay.
yep, this was the building that was where the old, this was on this corner over here. So when they raised that, they built the high
Now it's a
school.
playground.
Yeah. And then, and for just a short time, they connected this old building to the other one, for Willow River Elementary School before they tore it down.
But the old high school became a middle school
Yeah.
when John was probably 5th grade. So I have to go backwards.
1976,
76. Okay.
about 75 or 76, when the
Yep.
new high
So-
school opened, that became a middle school.
Yep.
This became middle
Yep,
school,
and
yeah.
it was elementary, middle school, and then you went up to the junior high, and then high school.
Let's
next
go.
to that, Yep.
I was one of the last classes that was in that high school.
school that actually had to move to the new high school.
Oh, okay.
So we did that over Christmas break. Wow. We made the switch.
Oh, that must have been something.
Yeah, it was in 74, 75. Something like that.
Did the students actually help move the things, or?
I don't think so. I don't
Okay.
recall that. Maybe
Okay.
I wasn't part of that.
Yeah, I think the teachers very much.
They used
One
the
year.
football team and everybody, our teams, teachers loaded up their classes and then last sports teams on a weekend.
Well, here we have the Phipps. Have you driven past the Phipps recently?
Oh, yeah.
Major renovation, major changes going on there. The
Is that
Phipps,
being done by the family who owns it?
yeah, the new family who owns
And
it,
so it'll be just a residential?
yes. I was told they were putting in an elevator. There's somebody in their family who is handicapped. And it will now be a private residence,
Oh, it will be a project.
yeah. And I think they hope to have it done in 2025,
There's a lot of work to do, redoing the foundation and everything.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's always been a beautiful building. It was built in 1884 to 1885, and it is at, 3rd Street, just across the street from the Octagon House. It is known for its beautiful Queen Anne style. After Mrs. Phipps' death in 1935, the house had several owners. From 1951 to 1966, it was a nursing home called Hudson Rest Home. Later, it was a rooming house. For several years, it was the Phipps Inn Bed and Breakfast. Now a private residence, the new owners are currently doing some work to address areas in need of repair. And major work. And then we have the Octagon House. Has everyone toured the Octagon House? Okay. Built in 1855, this unique 8-sided house was home to Judge John Shaw Moffett, who came to Hudson from New York. The building is now owned by the Hudson Area History Connection and is maintained as a museum complex, including the gardens. They have a garden house, carriage house, gift shop, and it's furnished with artifacts and antiques from 1850 to 1950 with provenance from the St. Croix Valley.
Mama has not.
Oh, yes.
When I was in that house, I had walked with a girlfriend who was Baptist, and she was practicing for a Christmas. And we walked down to the house and, what was his name? The old,
Moffett?
Moffett, yeah.
no, after that,
Oh,
Moffett Hughes.
Hughes.
John
Hughes.
Moffett Hughes.
yes. He played the piano for her while she sang her little tune, and then we went home. But it was beautiful, he had a baby grand piano.
Oh, yes.
It was quite a production.
It was really quite, it's really quite a beautiful place.
You were young then? Little girl? Right, so, 1930s.
Before high school even, yeah.
1930s.
We walked down from North Hudson, it was quite a trip.
No kidding.
But they
Well-
lived like ordinary people.
Yes, yes. Well, this is a old shot here. This would be the late 1930s. And this shows the malted milk shop on the left there. And that was the place to go, especially like for teenagers and everyone hung out there. So this is the business district looking south on Second between Vine and Locust. So in the 1930s, the owner of the malted milk shop was Harold Painter, Mike Painter. And that building also had other things in it as well, over the years. The Enterprise Steam Laundry, Shaker Photography, a tire shop. And it was located in what is now a parking lot next to Wells Fargo. Yeah, very popular.
May I add something?
Yes, oh, please do. This is what we like.
Across the street from the malted milk shop was the Cutterback Hardware Store. had a gas pump. out in front.
Oh,
So you went to the hardware store to get gas for your car.
and there's a picture, you can kinda see that. I don't know if that across the street, do you see that, Nancy?
I don't think that so, but.
But there
um,
is a picture of that
Yes.
somewhere, yeah.
And the city, isn't it in one of the city pictures? The city had found some pictures that were located in the courthouse at one, or in the city hall at one time. And they gotten in pretty bad shape, and so they donated them to the library. We were able to clean them up a little bit. And they, as you go down the stairs now to the library, those old pictures are hanging there. And I think one, I thought one of those had it, but I'm not sure on that, but I know I've seen that, yeah. Yeah.
And then the old theater, right? For many years, from 1921 to 1984, the only place in Hudson to see a movie was at the Rex. Later, it became called the Hudson Theater. And it was located at 205 Locust Street, close to where the Masonic Temple is.
Across from the pharmacy.
Yes, across from Mickelson's there. The building was raised in 1986 to make way for the Mid-America Bank, which is now Wells Fargo. This photo from 1938 reveals that the film The Story of Irene and Vernon Castle, starring Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, was being shown. Clarence Mickelson built the theater in 1921. That's a different Mickelson from the pharmacy. The first film shown at the new theater was Mary Pickford in the back door. And in 1927, a pipe organ was installed to provide music for the silent pictures. After Mickelson sold the Rex in 1938, the name was changed to the Hudson Theater, and then a series of people owned it, such as J.G. Haywood, Arthur and Ethel Peterson, Donald Buckles, and Stephen O'Connell.
My girlfriend worked the concession stand.
Oh, did
We did like a quarter to go and 10 cents was to get in, and then we could use 15 cents for popcorn or
Okay.
whatever.
People have so many fond memories of the theater,
Oh, yeah.
associating it with their childhood and, going to different things there. Here we have the post office, which is now a restaurant, The Post. And it was built at the northwest corner of 3rd and Locust in 1939 to 1940. In 1996, the post office moved up on the hill where it is today. A lot of people love the Carnegie Library. How many people have some fond memory of going to that library? Yeah, it's gorgeous. The Carnegie Library was at 304 Locust, and it was built in 1903 to 1904. It was built on the site of what at that time was called the Sealy House, which later became the Park Hotel. It was this huge hotel. Mr. William Phipps and George Dumars Klein were responsible for its existence. Through correspondence with Andrew Carnegie and a visit to Mr. Carnegie's financial agent in Hoboken, New Jersey, the building was erected. It is listed on the state and national registers of historic places, and it was Estrine Law for a while, and now it's a different tenant in there as well. Let's see.
Somebody had asked about the story of the lions.
Okay.
When we showed this presentation at Wintergreen not too long ago, and they asked why were there lions at the library entrances. And so I researched a little bit, and mainly because the New York City Library put lions out there as kind of guards to their knowledge, to their library. But at the time, it also was real popular because of the Renaissance Italian structures that were going up. And so that made it kind of famous. And then it really took off during the World's Fair in Chicago in 1893. They used bronze lions to keep guardian over the park area and the entrance of the Art Institute of Chicago there, so.
Are you sure those were there for the library?
I was gonna say, I don't think they were there when it was a library.
Just the old one.
But the next, David Estreen with his law office, I think he added them there, but originally, they were at a lot of the libraries, right?
Yes, yeah, yeah.
But I don't have a picture that shows them at the Hudson one. Okay. So the building served as the library until 1995, when the library moved to 911 4th Street. Do you remember that? Remember when it was there? And then in 2020, the library moved here.
2010.
Yeah, it wouldn't be 2020, 2010. Yes.
There's we have here two of the tables from the original Carnegie Library. One of them is in the history room, and the other one is in the back corner, or study area back in the corner there, with a plaque on, that it was from the Carnegie Library.
And they are great. Old wood tables are sturdy and
Yep.
nice tables. And then here we have some interior views. The one on the left is a real old view, and I can't see what that says. These were more recent before it closed. Maybe the 80s or something, or 90s, early 90s.
I used to smell that picture.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say that, the smell was
Yep.
wonderful.
Yes, it was.
This is the old sanatorium, or the Oliver Wendell Holmes Hospital, that would have been at kind of the end of 7th Street, north of 7th, and it overlooked Lake Malibu. It was built in 1887 by Dr. Irving Wiltrout. It was located, as I said, it was located on the north side, or north end of 7th Street. Wiltrout named the hospital after his favorite writer and physician. Dr. Holmes was so honored by this that he wrote an inaugural poem for the hospital's dedication on Tuesday, June 7th, 1887. In 1894, Dr. Sam Johnson purchased the hospital, and it became known as the sanatorium. He was the medical director and manager until his death in 1903. Dr. Bradford then took over until 1934. And you get this is just a beautiful shot, you can see more or less. And now there are homes, all big homes down in there. The sanatorium burned down in May of 1934. It was a beautiful building, modified Queen Anne style, that had spacious verandas. Yes,
Was it actually a hospital?
yes. It started it was a hospital. The sanatorium was actually kind of, when Bradford took it over, it was actually Hudson's Hospital. But for a time, it did attract people who there's a lot of mental kind of issues, and they had a place you could go down and go in and go swimming and boating, because they believed that exercise and getting out in the fresh air and that was good for you.
And a lot of times at the times that people were just prescribed rest, and so it was a place to go to rest.
And one of our most recent donations is a hymnal from the Oliver Wendell Holmes Hospital. So it's really old. And we are hoping to display that in the future. Really cool. And another shot of the outside of the sanatorium with the nurses and patients.
I love the people dressed up, it just
Oh.
really sets the time.
Isn't that, yeah.
And then the horse in the background,
Yeah,
and the lady sitting on the back on the left, resting.
and there must have been a wonderful breeze that would go along there, I would think, too.
So I like that, yeah.
Yeah. And then Hudson really went without a hospital, formal hospital for some years. There were clinics and, doctors might come to your house, that kind of thing, but it really wasn't anything. The Memorial Hospital, opened in 1953, and it was kind of up where, Prospect, I got the right part, Prospect Park.
Prospect.
And and now it's just leveled, there's nothing there. You can see remnants of the old parking lot.
Exactly.
But it was a 32-bed, $450,000 hospital, dedicated in 1953. The first administrator was William Hale, who was succeeded by Theodore Besser in 55. The need for the hospital became acute after the burning of the sanatorium in 1934. So that's 19 years, right? Little was done to get a hospital until Stephen and Helen Phipps established the William H. Phipps Foundation. And in 1946, the Phipps Foundation offered $70,000, which became the nucleus for establishing a city hospital. In 1950, a referendum overwhelmingly passed in favor of a municipal hospital, and later the Junior Chamber of Commerce, under the leadership of Thomas Bonner, instituted a fundraising campaign. And part of that fundraising involved the snowballs. Who remembers the snowballs, which were these really elegant dance affairs, many years held at the Hudson House. Yeah.
I have a question, if this was built in 1953, my husband's sister was born in like 1951. And I know she wasn't born at home, so where did they go? Does anybody?
I have somebody's receipt. They went to one went to River Falls.
Yeah, my brother and I in the 40s were born in River Falls.
I was born in St. Paul.
St. Paul.
Okay,
Yeah, St. Joseph's Hospital.
wow.
Karen and I worked there as nursing assistants.
Oh, wow,
Went on to be nurses.
that's amazing. Well, yes, Lorraine.
Before that, there were 2 laying-in hospitals, one on Orange Street that Mrs. Daly ran. And then when she retired, another one, Mrs. Quidlet opened a laying-in home on the end of Locust, but on 7th Street.
What's it called, a lane?
The Teeter, the house that's in the end.
Term for OB.
Oh.
My boys were born there, and my daughter was born in River Falls. Went to a real hospital.
It's hard to imagine like not having that hospital care. And then we know that eventually this hospital was raised, and in 2003, the new one on Stage Line Road was built. JR Ranch. Another place that a lot of people had some good memories, especially when they had the rodeos. Very, very popular. What's there now? Is it, I wanna say Mike's Porum or something. Yeah, it's the same place. It was founded by John Roshnot, who came from South St. Paul in 1950. He also owned the Hudson Harbor Restaurant, which was located on 2nd Street in 1963. In 1960, he purchased a 90-acre land parcel that had been part of Charlie Ward's holdings, the Quality Park Farm Number 1. And then he transformed the house barn into the restaurant. From 1963 to 1985, there was a popular JR Ranch rodeo, which brought quite a crowd. And I think they had like Michael Landon and I don't know who else.
When the rodeos were running, they wanted to know where to get hay and straw. So John sent them over to Bob Jacobs. So the cowboys would come to our place even when we weren't home and help themselves to the hay and the straw in the barn. Oh, really? To replenish over there at the rodeo.
Wow. Yeah, very, very popular. A lot of very well-known, rodeo clowns and other people coming to that. And this was Roshnot's other one, the Hudson Harbor, where chicken is king. Or they would say, our chicken is worth crowing about. There were actually 2 locations on Second Street. He was, 412 for a while, 412 Second, which, I'm trying to think, there is a business in there right now. There's a parking lot next to it, and then eventually he moved across the street. And the restaurant then later was owned also by a different person, Norm Anderson. Ole Anderson, yep. So another very, very popular place.
I'm sure that's haunted. I
Really?
heard that.
I've heard that too.
Have you? Oh, that's interesting. Well, here's the menu. And so you can kind of get some idea of a ham steak, $1.75. Turkey sandwich, 60
For
cents.
1 for 2. Jeez.
Yeah, it's just amazing. The Hudson Hotel was built on the site of the Chapin Hall, and that area had always been a hotel. I mean, it really was. There were 2 Chapin hotels. The first one had burnt down, then the second one burnt down, and then they built this one in 1930. So now they'd reconfigured it, and now it's called Tulgren Square. The one thing that was real popular there was the bar, the Badger Room. People like the Badger Room.
Bartender.
Who said they bartended there?
My grandfather bartended.
Oh, your
there.
grandfather bartended,
His-
wow.
His sister-in-law sat there and played the piano, she could play by ear, entertain people.
Wow. I think there was even a taxi service out of there, or,
There was Western
Bus-
Union.
bus-
My mom worked in the Western Union. She
Western-
sold bus tickets.
okay,
83 cents to go back and forth to St. Paul.
83.
Yeah. When
Wow.
we were there.
That's amazing.
It was also the bus stop, when we used to have buses come through. And you did that through the entrance to that.
Oh, okay, they were set up for that.
So that was a bus stop parking out there. And they
Dr.
even had a
Turner's dental.
bellboy.
How was he there?
That's cool. And then more recently, the Hudson House, and it was really hard on the Historic Hudson Facebook page. I kind of documented the destruction of that building. And it was really hard because so many people associated it with weddings and,
Yep.
you know, group meetings and all sorts of different memories that they had. This is a picture of the Hudson House in, pardon me, 1990. The Hudson House at 616 Crestview Drive was opened for business in 1965 by owner Sam Burren. The original facility had 46 hotel rooms, 15 motel rooms, a commercial building with cocktail lounge, coffee shop, formal dining room with stage, large banquet, and several meeting rooms. Remember, later, the Weight Watchers were always in the basement. Just killed yourself to go down there anyhow. I digress. And in 1972, the addition was made of 44 modern hotel rooms and a swimming pool. The Hudson House was purchased by Harold Schultz in March of 1976. Many improvements and extensive remodeling were done at that time. An enlarged health club, conversion of many rooms into luxury suites, upgrading of rooms to king or queen size beds. And they had new carpeting, wall covering, drapes, and that sort of thing.
Water beds too.
Water beds.
Yeah.
Yes. So Harold took in, his son Stan Schultz became also involved with the hotel. And they also had live comedy shows in the dining room. Later on, they had the off-Broadway dinner theater, which was fun to go to. Let's see. They had a lot of different advertising supportive of the community.
May I add,
Yes.
that hotel would be full because they took the overflow from hotels in St. Paul when they had,
Oh,
and Minneapolis when they had big doings, that they ran out of rooms, so they came over here.
wow. And at that time,
Built this hotel.
couldn't you just exit right off the highway too, right? Wasn't
Yep,
there,
yes, you
there
could.
was an exit right there, so it was very convenient, right? But a lot of notable people performed there, visited there. Again, you know, just in my time since 1990 on, every year they had the big craft sale there.
I miss the craft sale.
Teacher retirements, you know,
Yeah.
you just miss a lot of the things that were there. Wedding receptions, huge, yep, yep. So unfortunately, the Hudson House, it was razed, and we know that, it is now the grocery store which had your grand opening. So Festival Foods is there now, but I think everybody always will remember the Hudson House. Ben Franklin. The first Ben Franklin was located at 516 Second Street, above what is now the Black Rooster Bistro in the Opera House building. It was owned by Fred Kramer, is it Kramer? Kramer pronounced, and he was in business there in the 1960s to late 1970s. And then later it moved across the street, a different owner, but I don't think it was there for too many years. Dibbo's, the Dibbo's Cafe. And later on, of course, we had the Rainbow Room and all the rock bands coming in and everything, but the one thing I thought was so interesting was the cafe. Because, it was said that if you ever really wanted to know what went on in Hudson, you went in there, and there were regulars, they would sit around here, we have some of them. We have, is that Bob Waller, the Evensons, Willis Miller, Bertie McSorley, he had insurance company, I think, Dave Anderson, cars, yeah. Bill Radosevich is another name I hear a lot, he wasn't in that picture, but, yeah.
Yes.
Great cinnamon and the banana cream pie, right? And you'd have to, for entry into the nightclub, you had to give a banana?
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, it's great.
I worked at Ayrton's grocery store, and on Tuesday nights, it would just be a steady stream of people coming in and buying one banana.
I love that, that's so great. And then we just thought we'd show a couple pictures of the parks, since I think that's one of Hudson's greatest features are the parks. And so here we have Prospect Park, Hudson's oldest park, and Silas Snell's grave is there.
Is the pavilion that's there now, is this the original?
Part of the original,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah, it's still there.
Yep.
It's been redone.
yes.
It looks like this has windows, was it actually a self-contained building?
It looks like it like they probably took those out, yeah, and
But it had
it's open,
screens.
more open now,
Yeah,
yeah,
they don't have any glass or nothing now.
yeah.
In
Any
the
idea
thirties,
when it
the North
officially-
Hudson School would have their school picnic. Remember the school picnics? at the end?
Oh, yeah.
And the Easter egg hunts.
And
Yep.
Easter
Yep.
eggs there, and I still remember that wonderful school picnic hot dish.
I remember tumbling down the hill
Yeah,
for Easter egg.
picnic hot dish because that was so good.
So good.
When did it officially become Prospect Park? As a kid,
Oh.
I always called it Liberty Hill.
Liberty Hill.
Yeah.
My grandfather.
I don't know that on here, certainly in that by the 1880s, it was a rural, one of the first one. The next slide, we have a picture of the Liberty Hill view. Here, this is 250 feet above the level of Lake St. Croix. And it was advertised as being accessible by carriage and affords a delightful view of the surrounding countryside. This was a view from the 1870s. So it's, I don't know when it officially became a park, but it was early,
Is that the Dyke Road in the
No,
distance
That's
then?
a train.
Railroad.
That's train
So,
tracks.
yeah,
Yep.
railroad tracks
Yeah,
there.
the toll bridge didn't go in until 1913, so.
And this was on the fire department, the tower. that
The
was on
original fire
the
department,
original
yeah.
fire
Any
department there.
other buildings still there?
Oh.
Doesn't look like it.
In the 1870s, yes, we would have what is now Agave would be dated from, I think, that time period, wouldn't it? Or was that 1880s?
This is 1870s.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so this would have been shortly not terribly many years after the fire. So I would expect that a lot of them, I mean, we know the fire hall is down.
Is that the Williams building?
That looks like
Amy?
the Williams building.
That is where the Associated Bank, the old Associated Bank building is now.
That was built early, yeah, that's
Yeah,
probably,
That's early.
of course, that's not there
United
now either.
Corporation, when did that come in?
Oh,
There's a good
30s, 20s,
Okay.
30s?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I remember about that too.
That's a good question, I don't know if I ever looked at it for that.
Yeah, cause it would've been more to the right.
Mm-hmm,
Mm-hmm.
mm-hmm.
It was right down on the river.
Yeah, it was.
Right. I think
Right by
where
the band shell.
Purified, yeah, in that
Yeah,
area.
right around that
Yes.
area.
United
Yep, my uncle
was to the
first
right of
house on
Walnut.
First Street,
Yeah.
And it would've been right up front of his house.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
then left to that.
If you
When I was
notice,
little, that bank on the other side, the Minnesota side, the whole bank would burn in spring and fall. And we just watched the fire.
Well, the trains probably started the fires.
They probably did,
Yeah.
but they
Yeah.
said the Indians used to burn it off also.
Oh, yeah, could be.
Oh, that's interesting.
and notice too, there was quite a mix of both houses and businesses downtown in the earlier times too. So it wasn't just straight a business district.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, people love
Oh,
this
yeah.
one too. Lakefront Park, it wasn't always as beautiful as it is today. In Stories of Old Hudson, Willis Miller noted that prior to 1922, Hudson's lakefront, not yet a park, was an eyesore. A collection of dilapidated and unsightly boathouses and remnants of former warehouses and other unsightly waterfront debris. This all changed in 1922 when the family of Hans Anderson gave the city of Hudson $2,000 to turn the area into a park. Christian Berkmos, who was the original chairman of the park board in the 1880s, became involved, and through his efforts, the lakefront was transformed into the lovely park we have today. In 1936, Mr. William Caster's will gave money for a fountain in Lakefront Park. The fountain was constructed in 36 and dismantled in 1986, and we actually have the plaque here, the original plaque.
Where was the fountain?
Right by the boat launch.
Not far from the boat launch and the boathouse. It's kind of a different looking fountain, not like a fountain, like more like a water fountain.
I remember that.
Right.
To the left, that was kind of the band shell.
Yes,
Yeah, the band shell was
yes,
in the back to the left.
yes.
Yep. Oh, you can kind of see it in the light right there. Yep.
The original boathouse was where the boat launch is today. Children used to enjoy a World War I cannon there too. The howitzer remained an attraction until 1944 when it was dismantled and removed during a scrap metal campaign during World War II. Although some people maintain they still remember a cannon there from not that many years ago, like in the 60s and 70s, but I've not seen any proof
I
of
remember on
that.
4th of July, we used to do the cow chipping throws down there.
Oh,
So this
Right
building
by the
is
band
where
shell.
the boat launch
pardon me?
Yes.
is? Is this building close to the boat?
Yes. Yeah.
Because it looks similar
Yeah.
to the building.
And actually, it was built by John Lee, who built a lot of the homes in the area. So, it was quite well made.
It must have been deep enough for divers
Yeah,
to dive down there.
yeah. Yeah, very fun. And then we'll show the next couple slides of
Oh, yeah.
Lakefront Park.
You can still see the toll bridge behind there too.
Yeah.
So 11:30, so we'll move along here. we don't wanna keep you unduly. A few more slides. I just want to acknowledge Christian Berkmos. This is his photo because he really was the father of the Hudson Park system. He did so much. He was a businessman. He had a store downtown on Second Street, and he just involved himself in all the parks and
Do you know
really.
what kind of business he had?
Mercantile, just a dry goods, different variety of store. And somewhat, he also had something to do with groceries.
Grocery, yeah.
Wilberg and Berkmos groceries. So Christian donated 27 acres of land that he purchased from Anita North. And that became what is now Berkmos Park. And of course, then he was big on protecting the Sioux Indian burial mounds. And now we don't have 2 teepees anymore, just the one. Okay. Berkmos Park.
Very few trees. Wow, that's pretty open now.
That was a popular place in the Depression time. We were having such hot weather for year after year. And everyone would go to Berkmos Park to get cool.
Oh.
Trees over the river, yeah.
And there would be so many people who couldn't walk.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. They had their blanket, and it was just as hot as it was at home.
But you're all suffering.
They
together.
like that. Well, we just wanna, we just have like 5 slides left. Do you want me to finish? Okay. We just can't go without talking a little bit about Charlie Ward. And this is his wife Yvetta, who also had the Hudson paper for a while. And he's kind of a controversial person, shall I say, in that there was a lot of, connections. He was very in and out of jail at different times in his life, but it's kind of a really like a success story. So what happened?
It's called it color.
Yes. In 1919, he was arrested on what he described as a setup on a narcotics charge, and was sentenced to Leavenworth Federal Prison for 1 to 10 years. And while in Leavenworth, he studied electrical and mechanical engineering, and he met H.H. Bigelow, who was serving time for tax evasion. The two got along quite well, and when Charlie got out of prison, he headed to see Bigelow in St. Paul. In 1925, Bigelow offered Charles a job at Brown and Bigelow, and that's business specialized in calendars and stationery, beautiful calendars. He earned $25 a week at a punch press, but it didn't take him long, and he worked his way up to be vice president. In 1933, Bigelow drowned while fishing in northern Minnesota. Charles was voted in as president of the company, and when he took over the leadership, the company did a $2 million business. By 1948, that amount was $36 million. He really loved Hudson, and we can see a picture of his house in the next. The one thing I always like to talk about, I don't know if you know Gus or George Nelson, and I had interviewed him for the Historic Hudson Peyton, his nicest man. And
Has he been into any of these? Have you done anything that he's been to? He's my uncle.
oh, I just love him.
So he would love.
We've interviewed him,
Yeah.
and that was, this next piece is part of that interview. He, we keep in touch with him.
Was Ward Avenue named after him then?
Is what?
Ward Avenue?
Yes. But I'd like to talk about Gus's memory of Charlie Ward. And Charlie Ward, who had this beautiful home out on Stage Line Road, he was very, very good about looking at who didn't have money, who had money, who didn't have money. And so he was very generous. And Charlie would get a list of all the families that had kids that couldn't afford anything for Christmas. And Gus Nelson was very poor, lived kind of down by where Dairy Queen is today, down that area. And Charlie Ward gave him what he says was the best gift he ever had in his life. And that was a pair of boots that had a little pocket knife holder with the pocket knife. And he almost gets tearful about it when he talks about it. It was just a beautiful memory. And Charlie helped out a lot of different people. And then we'll just end here with just a couple of downtown slides. This looks like what, 40s? Mickelson Drugs would be on the four left over there. And you can see the water fountain on the corner. People love that. There was another one by what was the First National Bank. I think there were 2 water fountains.
I found a picture of my dad taking care of that water pump. He was on the water department.
Oh,
And it's a picture, they were winterizing it maybe or something.
well, it was real big the rite of spring when they turn them back on again, you know, it was a big deal.
Well, and back then, people had respect, you know, they were spitting their gum in there, spitting.
Right,
Right.
right.
People had respect.
Right.
And then here we have another shot, a Hudson Hotel on the right. And then Erickson's is very visible, before they moved.
Father-in-law's barber shop is on the left right there.
Which one?
John's barber shop.
Oh, yes, yes. Other great memories with Don's barber shop. And this is, I believe, our final one, and this is a more recent, 1950s, 60s. And you can see the Hudson Harbor on the left and the other different businesses here. And is that where they had,
The facade of the
Covered.
bank, they had covered up the First National Bank, yeah, with that.
so it looked more
Facade.
modern or something? Well, we can't thank you enough for coming today, and thanks for all your input, and I am still looking to interview people. So if you or you know somebody who would like to be interviewed, I wasn't too bad, Lorraine, was I, when I interviewed you? No. Put her on the spot. It's not a scary thing, I don't bite, so.
And if you have topics you want us to look into to do a different presentation, let us know.
And Nancy, does it look like the history room is available?
But, yes, it's open right now.
If
so
you have not stopped in the history room, you can see a lot of Lorraine's donations and other things. Please feel free to stop in there and just look around.
Did you interview Ron?
Yes. He was just in last week with Dorothy, because they were identifying photos in an album. Yeah. Yeah, I think I've interviewed 7 or 8 now.
Thank you very much for today.
Thank you.
That